A man can be applauded by 1,000 people and walk home starving because none of them were clapping for him. They were clapping for the face he built, so they would never have to meet the one underneath.
Put your hand on your throat for a moment, around the base of it, where the voice comes from. Most men carry a tightness there they have stopped noticing, a low constriction, a held quality, as if something is always being managed on its way out of the mouth. That is the seat we are working in this hour, the throat, the place a man's true voice is supposed to live, the place where what is inside him is meant to come out into the world as itself. And the deception that sits on it is the one almost every man is running right now without knowing it, because it does not feel like a lie. It feels like getting along. It feels like being likable. It feels like simply doing what you have to do to be accepted. So let me name the symptom, and you check it against your own life in the privacy where no one is watching. You are, in most rooms, a slightly different man than the one who exists when you are alone. There is a version of you that you put on, the way you put on a coat, before you walk into the meeting, the party, the family dinner, the comment section, the call. It is calibrated. It knows what this particular audience wants, and it delivers it. It laughs at the right time, agrees in the right places, performs the right amount of confidence or humility or ease, and it works. People respond to it, and you have gotten so good at wearing it that you can run it on autopilot while the real you watches from somewhere behind the eyes, a little tired, a little far away, and then you go home and you take the face off, and instead of relief there is a strange hollowness, because the applause you collected all day was for the face, and the face is not you, and some part of you knows that you have once again gone a whole day without being met by a single living soul. And the exhausting part, the part no one warns you about, is the switching. You do not wear one mask, you wear a dozen, a different calibrated face for the boss and the client and the wife and the kids and the old friends and the new ones. And you change between them so fast and so often that there are days you genuinely could not tell a man, if he asked you point blank, who you actually are underneath all of them. You have been so many versions of yourself for so many audiences that the question of which one is real has started to feel quaint, even unanswerable, and that disorientation is not a sign that you have no self. It is a sign of how completely the mask has done its work, because the deepest cost of a life of performance is not that other people never meet you, it is that eventually you cannot find yourself either. You reach for the true face and your hand closes on another mask and another behind that, and you begin to suspect in the worst hours that the masks might go all the way down. They do not. But the suspicion itself is part of the deception, and we will come to why. That hollowness is the symptom, and it lives in the throat as that low constriction, the voice that has learned to come out pre-shaped to please, that has not spoken a fully true and fully unguarded word in so long, the man has half forgotten what his own unmanaged voice even sounds like. We are going to find that voice again in this hour, but first I have to show you the mask itself, where it was forged and why, because the face you have been wearing is older than your own social fears. It was an art before it was your habit, and it was a weapon before it was an art. There is a story the old texts keep, and on the list of the arts the watchers brought down to humanity, tucked in among the working of metal and the cutting of roots, there is one that has always puzzled the comfortable readers, because it seems too trivial to belong in a catalogue of dangerous knowledge. The Book of Enoch says the watchers taught the painting of the face, cosmetics, the dye, the pigment, the adornment, the art of altering how a face appears, and the shallow reading shrugs and calls it a warning against vanity, a quaint old anxiety about women and makeup, and moves on, the way the shallow reading always moves on, having missed the actual installation entirely. Go deeper. Cosmetics, in the watcher's sense, are not about beauty. They are about the engineering of appearance, the deliberate craft of presenting a face that is not the face you actually have. That is the real teaching, not how to be more beautiful, but how to manufacture an appearance, how to put a constructed surface between your true face and the eyes of the world, how to be seen as something other than what you are. And once you understand that, you see that the painting of the face was never really about pigment. The pigment was just the first and crudest version of a technology that would grow over the centuries into the total apparatus of the manufactured self that we now live inside. The Watchers taught the first woman to alter her appearance, and in doing so they installed in the human race a principle. The principle that the way to be safe and the way to be wanted is to present a surface that is not the truth, and to become skilled at the gap between how you appear and how you are. And here is the deeper thing, the thing that turns a cosmetic into a curriculum. When you teach a whole people to routinely present false surfaces to one another, you do something to their eyes as well as their faces. You train them to stop expecting the face to match the being behind it. You train a civilization in masked perception, in the unconscious assumption that everyone is presenting a constructed surface, and that this is simply normal. This is just how people are. You do not look too hard at the gap between the appearance and the truth, because everyone has a gap, and it would be rude or naive to look. And a people trained to not look closely at faces, trained to accept that the surface is not the substance, has lost something it desperately needs, which is the instinct to notice when the face in front of it does not belong to a friend. The mask does not only hide the wearer, it blinds the watcher. It is, in the deepest sense, a defense the predators installed in their prey, a training that teaches the herd not to look too closely at the wolf's borrowed face. And that is not a metaphor reaching, it is the heart of why this particular art was on the list. The powers the Gnostics called the Archons do not, in the old understanding, appear as monsters. They rule by impersonation. They wear borrowed faces. They operate through the human surfaces they can occupy and the human institutions they can wear. And the one thing that would expose them is a people who still looked closely at faces, who still trusted the instinct that says something behind those eyes does not match the face in front of them. So the very first thing to install, before the metal and the potions and the rest, was a training that taught humanity to stop looking. Teach a people that everyone wears a constructed face, and that this is normal, and that it is rude to look past it. And you have blinded them to the only thing that could have warned them. The painting of the face was never mainly about the wearer's vanity. It was about the watcher's camouflage. It taught the prey to accept masks so that the predator could wear one and walk among them unremarked. And a man who has spent his life accepting that the surface is never the truth has lost, completely, the discernment that this whole next stage of the work, the seat of the eye, exists to give back. And the curriculum, like every art the Watchers brought down, was built to teach itself forward without them. A child is not lectured into the mask, he absorbs it, because he is born into a world of masked adults, and he learns the art the way he learns a language, by immersion, before he can think. He watches his father become a different man on the phone than at the table. He watches his mother's face rearrange itself at the door for the neighbor, and rearrange back the moment it closes. He learns, long before words, that the face is a thing you operate, that there is a public surface and a private truth, and that the gap between them is simply what it is to be a person. No one has to install the mask in him on purpose. The world installs it by being what it already is, a hall of mirrors reflecting masks into masks, and the boy takes up the art as naturally as breathing and carries it forward to his own children, and the watcher who ground the first pigment never has to lift a finger again. But the mask did not stay in the pigment and the powder any more than the forge stayed in the blade. It came inward, and it went total, and now it is the water most men swim in without ever seeing it. Look at the age you live in. You live in the most cosmetic civilization that has ever existed. The painted face was the seed, and it has grown into the filter, the edited photo, the curated feed, the personal brand. the carefully managed image that a man now spends real hours of his real life constructing and maintaining, an entire second self made of surface, presented to a world that is doing exactly the same thing back to him. Every man you know is now running a manufactured face at industrial scale, and so are you, and the whole vast machinery of it would have stunned the watcher who first ground the pigment, because we have taken the painting of the face and we have built it into a planet-sized engine for the production of selves that are not real, presented to people who are not really looking, hungered after by men who go to bed each night a little hollower than the night before. But the deepest move of all, the one that finishes the work, is not the face you show the world, it is the face you show yourself. Because a man who has worn the mask long enough learns to wear it even when he is alone, to present a curated version of himself to his own awareness, an edited self-image, a flattering story, a managed account of who he is that he runs in his own head the way he runs the public face in a room. This is the inner mask, and it is the cosmetic turned all the way inward, and it is the reason a man can do this whole work and still not find himself, because he goes looking for the true face and meets only the version he has been performing to himself for 30 years. He cannot see his own real face because he has been painting it in private for an audience of one his whole life. He has a story about why he did the thing he is ashamed of, and the story is makeup. He has an image of himself as the good man, the strong man, the victim, the hero, whatever the role is, and the image is pigment over a face he has not actually looked at in decades. The inner mask is how a man lies to himself with his own self-concept, and it is the hardest of all the masks to take off, because to take it off he has to be willing to see what is actually under it, and the whole apparatus was built precisely so that he never would. I wrote about who you were built to be in the chapter on the charismatic self, and here is the truth the mask was installed to bury. You were built to be a messenger. The charismatic self is the part of a man made to be seen and to carry weight when he speaks, made for true influence, made to have a voice that moves other people because it is carrying something real. That is a holy thing. A man with a true voice changes the rooms he walks into, not by performing, but by being so fully himself that his presence gives others permission to be themselves too. And the deepest theft of the mask is that it counterfeits this holy capacity with a hollow imitation. It offers a man being liked in the place of being known, applause in the place of influence, a managed image in the place of a true voice, and a man who takes the counterfeit spends his whole life being seen by everyone and known by no one, collecting a love that cannot reach him because it is aimed at a face he made up. And the messenger carries a contract, and the old framework names it the contract of language. Hear it rightly. The contract of language is the agreement a man holds about what his words and his self-presentation are for, and there are only two ways to hold it. You can hold language as the carrier of truth, your voice and your face, as the honest outward expression of what is actually inside you, so that to see you and to hear you is to actually meet you. Or you can hold language as a tool of management, your words and your face as instruments for producing the right effect in the audience, calibrated for approval, optimized for acceptance, true only when the truth happens to be useful. The mask only works on a man who has signed the second contract. It can only run him if he has first come to believe that the purpose of his self-presentation is to get the response he needs rather than to tell the truth of who he is. And most men sign that contract young in a world that rewarded the performed self and punished the real one, that clapped for the mask and looked away from the face until the boy learned the lesson every charismatic wound teaches, that the real you is not safe to show, but a good enough performance will be loved. And the wound has two faces, the way every wound in this work has two faces, and a man tends to live mostly on one of them while the other waits underneath. On the one face is the hider, the man who shrinks, who performs smallness, who flatters and agrees and self-censors and disappears into whatever the room wants, who keeps the mask modest and pleasing and gives no one a reason to look closer. On the other face is the inflator, the same wound swung the other way, the man who performs largeness, who builds a grand persona, who manages an impressive image and works the room and turns himself into a brand, a show, a carefully lit production of a more successful and more certain man than the one who actually lives behind his eyes. They look like opposites, the self-effacing one and the self-promoting one, but they are the same man with the same wound, both certain the real face is not enough, both running a manufactured surface, one painted small to be safe and one painted large to be admired, and both equally far from the one thing that would heal them, which is to be seen without the paint at all. And here is what it cost you, in the body, where every real cost is paid. It cost you the throat, the seat of the messenger, the channel of the true voice. When the throat is sound, a man speaks, and what comes out is simply him, unguarded, the inside arriving in the world as itself, and there is a particular freedom in it, the freedom of a man who does not have to calculate his words because he is only ever telling the truth of himself. But under the mask, the throat becomes a checkpoint, a place where everything is inspected and adjusted on its way out, where the true word is held back and the useful word is sent forward, and over years that checkpoint becomes a permanent constriction. The low tightness you can feel right now, the held quality in the voice, the sense that speaking is always a managed operation and never simply a relief. A man can live his whole life with that checkpoint running and never once feel what it is to speak a fully unguarded word into a room and let it land as itself, and he calls the constriction professional or social skill or just being appropriate, and he does not know that he is strangling slowly on a voice that has not been allowed to be his own since he was a boy. And you can feel the checkpoint working if you slow down enough to catch it. Watch what happens in your throat in the half second before you speak in a room that matters. There is a tightening, a quick inward scan, a microscopic editing process that runs faster than thought, taking the true thing that wanted to be said and checking it against the audience and adjusting it, softening it, sharpening it, making it land, and only then releasing the approved version into the air. Most men run that process 10,000 times a day and have no idea they are doing it because it has become as automatic as swallowing, but it costs. Every one of those edits is a tiny abandonment of the true word in favor of the useful one, and 10,000 a day across 30 years is a man who has betrayed his own voice so many times that he can no longer locate it, who opens his mouth and the checkpoint speaks before he does, who has not heard his own unedited voice in so long that the sound of it, on the rare occasion it slips out, startles him like a stranger's. Now I have to name the field that keeps the mask in place, and you will know the shape of how I do it. There is a power the old texts name over this seat, and the moment I name it your imagination reaches for a grotesque thing, and the grotesque picture is the camouflage. The field is not a creature. It is a field, a weather, a pattern of hunger that moves through a man and through a culture, and over the throat it does its work through appetite. The old texts name it Beelzebub, and Beelzebub is one more of the Archons, one more of the ruling powers the Gnostics learned to name, and over the throat Beelzebub governs through the deepest and most respectable hunger of the social self, the hunger for approval, the appetite to be liked, which the field feeds endlessly and never once satisfies. Hear what this field actually is, because it is not gluttony in the small sense of a man who eats too much. That would be easy to see. Beelzebub is the field that whispers that the cure for the emptiness inside you is more intake, more approval, more being liked, more being seen, and that if you are still hollow, then you simply have not consumed enough yet. That is the whole art of it. The field presents the hollowness of the masked life as a deficiency of supply when it is actually a deficiency of truth. The man feels empty, and the field tells him the answer is more applause, so he sharpens the mask and performs harder and collects more approval. And the approval goes in and the hollowness remains, because approval aimed at a false face cannot feed a true self. It never could. It never will. And so the man consumes and stays starving, and the field grows fat on exactly that gap, on the endless distance between how much he takes in and how little of it ever reaches the one who is actually hungry. Gluttony presents itself as lifestyle, presents itself as ambition, presents itself as simply wanting to be successful and well-liked, and underneath the respectable hunger is a man at a feast that does not nourish, eating without end, getting emptier with every course. And there is a particular cruelty in how this field works, because it does not even let a man want his own wants. The hunger for approval is mimetic, it is caught from others, it is shaped entirely by the room, so that a man under this field does not actually know what he himself desires. He only knows what is approved of, what is admired, what the others are reaching for, and he reaches for that and gets it and feels nothing, because it was never his hunger to begin with. He spends his life pursuing things he does not want, in order to be admired by people he does not respect, for a self he did not choose. And the emptiness at the end of each acquisition is not a sign that he needs the next one. It is the body telling him the truth, that none of this was ever his, that he has been eating at a feast set by other people's appetites and wondering why he starved. The feast does not nourish because it was never your food. It was the room's food, and you have been swallowing it your whole life, trying to fill a hunger the room cannot name and cannot feed. A field needs thrones, and Beelzebub has built thrones in our age that the watcher who ground the first pigment could never have dreamed, because we have industrial manufactured face and the hunger for approval scale that has rewired the whole. There is the throne of the feed, where every man is now invited to build and broadcast a curated self and to receive in real time the precise measure of how much that self is approved of, rendered as a number, a count of hearts and thumbs, the exact dosage of approval delivered and withdrawn on a schedule engineered to keep him performing. There is the throne of the personal brand, the doctrine of the age that says a man should treat himself as a product, his personality as packaging, his life as content, his very face as a logo to be managed, the most complete version of the Watcher's teaching ever devised, an entire culture instructing its people to become professionally false and calling it self-development. And the genius of this newest throne is that it does not feel like submission, it feels like empowerment. The man building his brand believes he is taking control of his image, authoring his own story, becoming the master of how he is perceived. He does not feel like a captive painting a face for the predators. He feels like an entrepreneur of the self. And that is the disguise perfected, the captivity that markets itself as agency, the mask sold back to the man as the very tool of his liberation, so that he pays in hours and in anxiety and in the slow erosion of his own true face, for the privilege of his own deeper imprisonment, and thanks the field for the opportunity. There is the throne of the public eye in all its older forms, the stage, the screen, the pulpit, the office of reputation, every place a man can be rewarded for the performed self and punished for the real one. And there is the oldest and most intimate throne of all, the simple room full of people whose approval a man wants, the dinner table, the workplace, the friend group, where the mask goes on without a single device involved, where a man performs the acceptable version of himself to faces that are performing right back, a whole room of masks talking to masks, every soul in it lonely, every one of them certain that everyone else is the real thing, and he is the only one pretending. And that last detail is the cruelest turn of the whole field, because the masked man does not know the others are masked. He believes the gap is his alone. He looks
looks around the room at all the confident, composed, well-liked faces, and he concludes that everyone else is simply being themselves and succeeding at it, and that he is the lone imposter, the only one performing, the only one with a frightened true face hidden behind a competent surface. The whole room believes this. Every single person in it is certain they are the only fraud among the genuine, and so no one ever takes the mask off first, because each of them thinks they would be the only bare face in a room of real ones, when in truth they would be the first honest face in a room full of paint, and the relief that would move through that room if one man simply told the truth of himself is a relief. The field works around the clock to prevent, because the mask only survives as long as everyone believes they are the only one wearing it.
You have felt that relief on the rare occasions it broke through. The moment, maybe late at night, maybe after the third hard thing happened in a row, when someone in the room finally stopped performing and said the true and undefended thing, "I am not okay. I am scared. I do not have it figured out." And the whole room changed. The air changed. Every mask in it loosened at once, because permission had been given, because the first honest face had appeared and made the others possible. That is the thing the field most fears and most works to prevent, the contagion of honesty, because it spreads exactly as fast as the contagion of performance, and in the opposite direction. One true face unmasks a room. The field knows this, which is why it keeps every man convinced he must go on performing, must never be the first, must protect the surface at all costs, because the field's entire kingdom over the throat depends on no one ever discovering that everyone is as frightened and as hungry to be known as he is. So let me name the counterfeit all the way through, because a thing named in full loses the power it only held in the dark. Underneath the entire deception is a need, and the need is holy. The need is to be seen. You were made to be known, made to be witnessed, made to have your true self land in the awareness of another and be received. A man with no need to be seen is not humble. He is in hiding, severed from one of the deepest goods there is, which is to be genuinely beheld by another soul and not turned away from. The need is right. You are right to want to be seen and wanted and to matter to the people around you. There is no vanity in the wanting. It is the design. But the need is a doorway, and two things can come through it. The hunger to be seen can be met in being truly known, the real self shown and received, the true voice spoken and landing, the man met as he actually is. Or it can be captured by the field and routed into the counterfeit, which is being liked for a face you made up, and the counterfeit is built so close to the real thing that a man can spend his whole life collecting the applause and never once notice that it never reaches him, because it was never aimed at him. The counterfeit says, "You will be safe to exist once you have become someone the room approves of." The truth says, "You are already worth seeing," and the mask is the only thing standing between you and being known. Here is the turn, and the betrayal at the threshold of the throat comes, as it has at every seat, from two directions at once. From one side comes the voice of the field, the voice of the mask, and it says, "Perform." It says the real you is not safe and not enough, so build a better face, manage the impression, give them what they want, win the approval, and you will finally be secure. That is the first lie. Be false, and you will be loved. And from the other side comes a voice that sounds like its wholly opposite, and this audience has heard it many times from the higher teachers, and it says, "Transcend the self entirely." It says the self is an illusion, the personality is a mask all the way down with nothing real underneath it, the ego is a fiction to be dissolved, so do not bother trying to find your true face, because there is no true face. There is only emptiness, only the void, only the dropping away of all identity into a selfless light. That is the second lie. There is no true self to be known, so stop looking for one. And the two lies are the same lie wearing opposite robe. Both of them agree that there is no true face worth showing. The performer believes the true face is unacceptable, so he hides it behind a constructed one. The dissolver believes the true face does not exist, so he abandons the search for it into a spirituality of no self. The one buries the true self under a mask. The other denies the true self has any reality at all, and the field does not care which you choose, because both deliver the same prize, a man who never stands forth as his real, particular, God-given self and is known. One man is too afraid to take off the mask. The other has been taught there is no face under it to reveal. And Beelzebub feeds on both, on the performer starving at his feast of approval, and on the seeker dissolving his own God-given particularity into a void and calling the disappearance enlightenment. Now hear the truth that breaks both fences, because it is where this work parts ways with both the world of the brand and the gurus of the empty self. There is a true face. You were made as a particular, unrepeatable self, named and known and loved into being by a God who does not make masks and does not make voids, who delights in the specific soul he made you to be, and who calls you by a name that is yours alone. The self is not an illusion to be dissolved, and it is not a brand to be managed. It is a gift to be uncovered and shown. And the proof is in the one the Gnostic flees, because when God came among us, he did not come wearing a manufactured face, and he did not come as a faceless light. He came as a particular man with a particular voice, who said exactly what was true regardless of what the room wanted, who was so fully and unguardedly himself that the masked could not bear to look at him, and who told us that what is hidden will be brought into the light, and what is whispered in the dark will be shouted from the roofs, not as a threat, but as a promise, the promise that the era of the buried true self is ending, that you were made to be known. And he reserved his hardest words for exactly this deception, for the masked, the men whose public faces were clean and admired, and whose true faces were something else entirely. And the word he used for them is a word that came from the theater, from the stage, the word for an actor who speaks behind a painted mask. He called them hypocrites, and he did not mean it as a generic insult. He meant it with surgical precision. He meant the painted face, the performed righteousness, the gap between the surface and the soul. And he was not condemning them from above. He was diagnosing them with grief, because he could see what the mask costs. He could see that a man who has worn the painted face long enough loses the ability to find his own soul, and he came precisely to call that soul back out from behind the paint, to say to the buried true self of every performing man, "Come out, it is safe now, you can be seen." This is why the work is somatic, why I will not let you fix this with a better performance or escape it into a tidy emptiness, because the mask comes off in the body, in the throat, when a man finally lets a true and unmanaged word come out of him into a room and survives the saying of it, and discovers that the world did not end, and that for the first time in years he was actually there to be met. There is a virtue the old framework sets against the field of Beelzebub, and like all the others, it is not what a starving man would guess. The corrective for the man gorging on approval is not more careful performance, and it is not the renunciation of all desire to be seen. It is temperance, and temperance is not the killing of the appetite. It is the appetite brought back under truth, the man who no longer needs to consume approval without end because he is being fed by something real, the true self shown and received in the few places it is safe to show it. A temperate man can walk into a room and not perform, can let the applause come or not come and remain full either way, because his worth is no longer the thing on the table. It was settled before he walked in. Temperance is the fast that ends the binge, not by force of will, but because a man who has tasted being truly known loses his appetite for being merely liked. This is the thing willpower can never accomplish here, and it is why every attempt to simply stop performing by sheer discipline fails. You cannot white-knuckle your way out of the hunger for approval, because the hunger is real. It is a true hunger pointed at a counterfeit food, and a true hunger denied its counterfeit will only grow until it drives you back to the feast. The hunger does not end by starving it. It ends by feeding it the real thing. The first time a man is genuinely known, truly seen behind the face by even one person who does not turn away, something in him that has been ravenous his whole life goes quiet, and the quiet is not the silence of suppression, it is the silence of a man who has finally eaten. After that, the applause loses its grip on its own, not because he forced himself to stop wanting it, but because he has tasted the thing it was always a thin substitute for, and no man who has had bread goes on craving the picture of bread. That is how the appetite is healed, not from above by discipline, but from below, by being fed at last on the truth the counterfeit was only ever imitating. The archangel the old framework names over this seat is Raphael, the healing of God, and what Raphael restores is precisely this, a throat that can speak the truth of a man into the world without inspection, a true voice, a face that is simply his own. And you should know what you are reaching for, what a true-voiced man actually feels like from the inside, because if you have worn the mask your whole life, you may not believe the unmasked state is even available. A man living from his true face is not constantly confessing every thought. That is not it. Truth is not the same as having no privacy. He simply is not managing the gap anymore, because there is no gap. What he shows is what is there. He can be quiet without it being a strategy, and he can speak without it being a performance. And there is an enormous amount of energy returned to him that used to go into running the checkpoint, calculating the impression, monitoring the room. His throat is open. His voice carries weight, not because he engineered it to, but because there is a whole, undivided man behind it. He can be disliked and remain intact, because the thing being disliked is actually him and not a face he has to defend, and a real thing can survive disapproval in a way a manufactured one never can. That is the target. Not radical exposure and not the dissolving of the self into a void, but a man whose inside and outside are the same thing, who has stopped spending his life on the gap, who is simply, freely, unmistakably himself. I will not leave you with a beautiful idea and an unchanged body, because the mask above all is enforced in the flesh, in that checkpoint in the throat, and a beautiful idea will not open it. So we put it in the body, now at the throat. Put your hand on the base of your throat and feel the constriction that lives there, the held quality, the checkpoint, and in the privacy of this hour, where no audience is watching and no approval is on the line, say one true thing out loud, not to anyone, just into the room. Say a thing that is actually true about how you are, right now, unmanaged, uncalibrated, the thing you would never say in a room you were performing for. It can be small, I am tired, I am afraid, I am not okay, I want to be loved, whatever is actually true under the face, and feel what happens in the throat when a true word comes through the checkpoint without being inspected and adjusted first, because something will happen, some loosening, some first opening of a passage that has been constricted for years, the throat remembering what it is to let the inside come out as itself, then turn the same honesty inward on the inner mask, because the public face is only half the work. Sit with yourself and notice the curated self-image you have been running, the flattering story, the role you cast yourself in. Notice the version of the recent thing you did wrong. Feel for the makeup on, the angle that makes you the reasonable one, the victim, the man who had no choice. And then, gently, set the story down and look at what is actually under it, not to condemn yourself. Condemnation is just another mask, the mask of the man who is hard on himself so no one can be harder. Just to see, to look at your own real face without the pigment, the way you would look at a friend you love and are not afraid of, and to let yourself be for one moment exactly what you are, without the self-flattering story and without the self-punishing one, just the bare true face seen at last by the one set of eyes that has been painting it the longest, your own. That is the deepest unmasking there is, and it is the one that makes all the others possible, because a man who can finally bear to see his own true face has nothing left to hide from anyone. And then, when you are ready, take it into a room with one safe person in it. Not the whole world, not the feed, not the audience. One person you trust, and let them see, just slightly, the face under the face. Say the true thing, the unperformed thing, and let yourself be met as you actually are, instead of applauded as the man you invented. It will feel like exposure, because the mask has trained you to believe that the real you is unsafe, and the only way that belief dies is by being disproven, one true word at a time, in front of one safe pair of eyes at a time, until the throat learns that it can speak the truth and be received, that the real face can be shown and loved, that you were never meant to be a surface, and you do not have to keep paying with your whole life for an approval that was never going to reach you anyway. We have reclaimed 5 seats now: the ground, the fire, the will, the heart, and the voice, and the deception that comes next moves up to the third eye, to the seat of sight and discernment, because once the field has taken a man's true voice and replaced it with a managed one, it comes for his vision, for the way he sees his own life and his own fate. Having taught him to manufacture his face, it now teaches him to read his future as already written, to surrender his sight to a map drawn by other hands, to believe that the course of his life is fixed in the stars, and that he is only along for the ride. I am going to show you that map, and the art the watchers taught to draw it, and the lie that your fate is sealed, in the next video. It is on the end screen now, and it begins exactly where this one ends, at the throat, rising toward the eye. For now, stay a moment longer with a throat that has begun, even slightly, to open. Let it be enough that for the length of this hour you said one true thing, and the world did not end, that you felt the difference between being applauded and being met, that you remembered there is a real face under the one you have been wearing, and that it was always the one worth showing. You were never meant to be liked for a man you made up. You were meant to be known as the one you actually are. Come forward now as a man whose voice is his own again. Come forward as a man who would rather be known than be liked. Come forward as the messenger you were built to be, true-faced, true-voiced, ungovernable by any field that ever tried to sell you applause and call it love. If this is the work you came for, subscribe so the channel can walk the whole ascent with you, root to crown, one deception at a time. The next video, The Deception of the Stars, is waiting for you on the end screen. Begin there. Your true face was never the one to be ashamed of. It was the one they were all secretly hoping someone would be brave enough to show first.